Welcome to Beyond the Bee, an ongoing dialogue about the past, present, and future of the B Corp movement. Co-hosts Emmy, Allison, and Ryan Honeyman facilitate an open and honest conversation about the B Corp movement, advise companies on how to increase their impact, and provide a deep dive into the new B Corp standards that are shaping our community.
Hey everyone, Ryan Honeyman here from Lift Economy. So here's how this episode is going to flow. Emmy and I recorded an interview earlier with Farmer Cee Stanley, who you'll hear from a bit later in the podcast. Then I went back in and recorded this introduction to the podcast episode. So first, you're going to hear me do a little monologue talking about Dr. Bronner's decision to decertify as a B Corp. And in my monologue, I will talk about the most generous interpretation of the announcement. And then I will talk about what I think could have been done better. And then after that, we'll jump straight into an interview with me and Emmy and Farmer Cee, where we'll get her reaction to the announcement and how it affects her business. We didn't want to release this episode too soon to rush into an immediate emotional reaction. So this is more like a reflection with a trusted colleague in Farmer Cee to help get us a perspective from the B Corp community of someone who's in the farming world as a Black woman, as a small business, as someone who already is doing regenerative farming and is has unique perspectives on what's been going on in the B Corp movement and this decision by Dr. Bronner's. So we want to have this conversation to hold some space for the complexity of this moment and the impact the announcement has had, the feelings it stirred, and what it means for the broader B Corp movement. I'll also say this is not a one and done episode where this is from here on out the things that Lift Economy believes. This is me and Emmy and Farmer Cee having a conversation. It does not mean that we won't have more conversations with different folks in the future. Ideally, we want to have Dr. Bronner's on the podcast to talk about this stuff. So I also want to call out before we get in that in full transparency, this is a bit awkward because Dr. Bronner's is a client of Lift Economy. So they don't work with us on B Corp related issues. Emmy and I have never worked with them directly on any paid work. However, our business partner Kevin has on a new initiative that will be announced very soon. So with all this being said, even though they are a client of ours, we did not have any advanced knowledge of this announcement, nor did Kevin. One thing I would like to do here is do something called the most generous interpretation. So this is something I got from Parenting, Dr. Becky's Good Inside, from anyone who knows the book, which is if you were to look at someone's behavior, what is the most generous interpretation rather than the least generous? So in this case, what is Bronner's really trying to say? And what's behind the emotions driving this decision? I imagine their emotions are anger, frustration, impatience, helplessness, and sadness about the state of the world. And in particular, the political climate in places like the US and unfettered shareholder-driven capitalism. I think it's important for those of us in the B Corp community to know that supply chain, supply web-focused B Corps like Dr. Bronner's have different concerns than service-based B Corps that make up the majority of the B Corp community. Something like multinationals does have a impact for companies like Dr. Bronner's because they are competing against those companies and trying to do things right. In addition, product-focused B Corps have seen dilution in other certifications. It's one of the reasons why Dr. Bronner's created the regenerative organic standard along with Patagonia, is because they wanted to keep high standards. There's a lot to understand in a most generous interpretation to Dr. Bronner's press release. Can B Corp certification materially change multinationals' behavior, especially if those multinationals are not required to do eco-social certification? It's a fair question. And I think there's many in the B Corp community that are skeptical of whether B Corp certification can materially change companies that are beholden to the public markets or primarily shareholder-driven capitalism. Similarly, part of this press release speaks to the experience with B Lab around frustrations around transparency and responsiveness, and a feeling of shouting into the abyss when advocating for something like a tiered system. Many B Corps, including me and Emmy and the Lyft team, have had frustrations in the past about transparency and responsiveness from B Lab. And B Lab's trying the best it can with a lot of different stakeholders. And a lot of companies have felt they've been shouting into the abyss, especially during this period of time between 2022 to 2023, 2024. The final thing I'll say is that David Bronner and the Bronner's team, their approach is they are activists. Their styles are provocative and direct, designed to hold power accountable. So why don't we switch to how this potentially could have been handled better? So this in Lyft terms would be called even better if. First, I would say even better would be if Dr. Bronner's could have better thought through the reaction. How would this decision and the way that this press release plus media articles, how do they think that may have landed with folks? Many B Corps were caught off guard, including me and Emmy and others. And could the Bronner's team have better predicted this? Secondly, context. We're in an era of anti-ESG, anti-DEI backlash. So even mild mentions of diversity or climate action are under attack. And this announcement did not acknowledge that broader political reality. Again, you can't expect companies or everyone to always think of every outcome, but this is a calling out approach. This is not a calling in approach. To say that the integrity of the B Corp certification has become compromised and remaining certified, you can say remaining certified contradicts your mission. That's fine. You can make that choice. But to say that the integrity of the B Corp certification is compromised, I think there's ways to not throw the entire B Corp movement as not credible in your exit of the community. Another component is timing. So this announcement came right before B Corp month, which is in March, and the release of the new standards, which is also in March. Probably could have thought more about timing. So there could be a more constructive way to call in the B Corp community. You could say, for example, we have tried to engage with B Lab on these concerns, but don't feel heard. We respect the movement and values, and we've benefited from being part of the community. But in the future, we would like to go farther. So we're choosing to focus on other high-impact initiatives while continuing to hold ourselves to the highest standards. That's it. Great. That would be a sufficient exit. It's a short press release. Thanks to the B Corps, we've got a lot of value. We're going to go a different direction, but no hard feelings. The way this is currently framed is this movement is unacceptable and compromised. So for the Bronner's team, you have to realize what that means for those of us, the almost 10,000 of us who are still certified and believe in this movement. So we need to push for higher standards and hold each other in care because we really, really need each other right now. So I hope this conversation helps us move forward with more nuance, integrity, and collaboration. So without further ado, let's jump in. Our guest today is Farmer Cee. Clarenda Farmer Cee Stanley is a visionary entrepreneur, farmer, herbalist, and advocate for ethical business and sustainable living. Known affectionately as Farmer Cee, she is the founding CEO of Green Heffa Farms, a wellness brand and herb farm that celebrates the power of nature to heal and nourish. Raised on her maternal grandparents' farm, with an awarded professional background in marketing and environmental fundraising, and a deep and profound respect for the earth, Farmer Cee dedicates her life to promoting holistic health and wellness practices that honor the interconnectedness of all living things. Beyond her work as an executive, farmer, and herbalist, Farmer Cee is also a passionate educator and community leader. Through workshops, classes, and speaking engagements, she empowers others to support their health by incorporating herbs into their well-being program. Farmer Cee's approach is rooted in her belief that everyone has the ability to cultivate wellness from the ground up, starting with the soil beneath their feet. Her mission is to inspire others to reconnect with the earth, embrace their innate healing abilities, and live in harmony with the natural world. Farmer Cee, welcome to the show. And anything you'd want to add to your bio?
I'm a B Corp. My farm is a B Corp. I was the first official business to go through the level program, which I was fortunate to co-create the level program with someone Ryan, Andy Fife, who was with B Labs for a good bit of time and was leading some work at the time. And I had the fortune of sharing, and I'm being a little slick when I say I had the fortune of sharing. More like I feel B Labs had the fortune of hearing some feedback from
Indeed.
me in regards to the process. And from that, we were able to create Level. So, yes, this is my first official recertify what do you all call it? Emmy, recert?
That's probably our first disclosure of the podcast is that I have the joy and honor of supporting Farmer Cee through their first research and in Green Heffa's research. So the level program has been so cool. If folks don't know about it, they should definitely go check it out. At Lift Economy, we're big Andy Fife fans, but also obviously Farmer Cee fans as well.
So Farmer Cee, why don't we just jump straight into it? What did you think of the announcement about Dr. Bronner's decertifying?
Yeah, for me, it wasn't so much that it was a surprise because I come into it with a different perspective. It was a disappointment, honestly, and not because they necessarily have decided to forego the recertification. All right. Their argument, from my understanding, was that large multinational companies that had troubling ecological and labor histories have been allowed to use the B Corp badge, if you will, without meaningful accountability. And don't get me wrong, there's a valid conversation to be had about maintaining rigorous standards. But you decide to make this big announcement. Did you think about the impact on businesses like mine? Businesses that aren't existing because of generational wealth, right? Businesses that have to have conversations about the exclusion we can experience when we come into a space that is structured on a white dominant framework and where doing the right thing has to be incentivized by oftentimes entities that have done the wrong thing for a long time, and therefore they're in a financial position to have the privilege of being incentivized to do right. What about those of us who start out small, who do things right from the beginning, and are in spaces that we have to fight to get into? And then when we finally get into those spaces, you know, the undue effort it takes to get into those rooms is somehow labeled as or seen as you don't have merit. Do you know how hard it is to be a Black woman owned farm with B Corp certification? It's not easy. Nobody cut corners for me. Listened, perhaps, but not cut corners. And to be able to get into those spaces and then all of a sudden such a leader um, in the movement, you make this splash early. And I'm just curious, did you think about, if not B Corp, then what? And for me, just a little backstory, a little context. I came into farming from the philanthropic space, specifically environmental fundraising. And I worked with extremely high net worth individuals. So I was in the room, I heard the conversation. So one thing I know, that when things like this happen, usually there means that there's a shift in direction. That means something else is coming. It's going to be some other certification that has even more rigid standards. And if there is something else coming, I'm just curious. Were small businesses that have been historically excluded, were were they considered? Were they part of the conversation? I'd like to know those things. And I just feel like sustainability and ethical business, um, it can't be another gated community. All right, where those with generational industry power decide when the space is valid, and then when it's time to move on. If the mission of B Corp, if it needs strengthening, then strengthen it. But it starts to become power plays at some point. And for me, someone who built their brand on principles of equity, environmental stewardship, economic prosperity, and education, and ethical business practices, it's not that I got this certification because it's trendy or it was convenient. It's because it's necessary for me to try to level the planting field. And that's not going to change. So whether it's B Corp certification or whatever comes next, the question still is whether the movement itself is going to continue to work towards becoming truly inclusive, or is it once again going to shift in a way that locks out those of us who weren't even invited?
I do think that there was, an intention behind this announcement to really encourage the community to aim higher, but it really feels like, and what sort of you're touching on and alluding to is like they were very much sort of talking to large B Corps. They were talking to large multinational corporations. Their
Yep.
frustrations lay in the dilution and other certifications, that their experiences with those certifications for multinational corporations. But at the end of the day, the B Corp community is largely small B Corps. And increasingly B Corps owned by folks that identify as Black, Indigenous, and people of color.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really feel like they were thinking about those folks when they made an announcement like this. It feels like, yeah, it just feels like it feels a little bit like, yeah,
Yeah.
like we're not, the rest of us are like not doing good enough when ideally, like we're all doing our best. But especially by
Yeah,
Black-owned businesses.
exactly. And even like the dilution concept, is it dilution or is it making this a standard that is reflective of a broader, more diversified um, business model, right?
Right.
If you're focusing it on the big companies, I mean, some of those companies have decades of experience in spiritual raggedness. Okay. You're not going to certify that away. It's baked into the culture of the organization.
Right.
But what you may see as some type of dilution, it may make it easier for me who's on the other end. And although amongst the most educated demographic, I'm also a member of the least funded. So, and I'm in agriculture. I'm in farming, which is notorious for being an industry in which a lot of people are economically vulnerable. So, yeah, is it really dilution or is it increasing accessibility? But the majority of the businesses are your medium-sized, smaller businesses. And if you lessen the value of this certification, that can have real impact on us economically. My question would be, if you feel that B Corp is, diluting its mission or whatever, that means that it's a minimum. It's not the gold star to you, it's minimum, right? Why not keep it and then go do your other thing? Is it that big of a deal that you've got to make this big announcement? We have decided not to do it, but out of respect for all of your businesses, friends, your peers, your mutuals, whatever, you didn't think about anybody else, just your personal feelings as a company. We're not going to certify and you must know about it. Y'all could have gone quietly. You could have did a little statement, but then, we still support B Corps for many companies. We still believe in the work. You could have made it real considerate.
I also think like in the press release, they talked about like this sort of feeling of their feedback like is falling on deaf ears at B Lab, which I do think a lot of people can like that resonates with a lot of people in the B Corp community and just being like, we're not feeling seen and we're not feeling heard. And I think a lot of that has been a lot better addressed in recent years. I think there are much better mechanisms for B Lab to gather and analyze feedback from the community and incorporate it into all different aspects. It's usually mostly community, but the standards like evolution of standards process, is comprised of thousands of data points and that type
Yeah.
of situation. But it just also feels like, again, not the best like format or the best tone to make an announcement where like we really shouldn't be letting perfection be the enemy of progress. Like B Corp is not perfect and no one said it was. It just still ends up being the best tool that we have to mitigate this form of extractive capitalism. And there's no saying that like we can't get better, but in a world where there's so many B Corps that are actually really worried about being able to meet the standards, the next version of the standards, because they are much more rigorous. It just feels like a little bit tone deaf for
Yeah.
this particular moment.
Yeah.
Um,
And honestly, even when I hear that, oh, I feel like I wasn't heard. I just have to be real as a Black woman. I'm like, no, you don't know what it is to not be heard.
That part.
You have no idea. I'm just getting into the room. I haven't even been here long enough to know if I'm being ignored. Give me a minute, you
Right.
know? And if you invite me to some of your rooms, then maybe like let's go there. And yeah, I just feel like with so much happening in DC right now, right? With so many things being rolled back, and there's so much conversation. I get asked every day to forget major stuff that I'm just like, nah, you don't just let that go. That's just not one of those things. If you have issues, I get it. I just don't understand, to use a old cliche. Why did you throw the baby out with the bathwater? Why? And it's because you're a big player. You don't need it doesn't make any difference to you, honestly. This is my feeling, okay? I don't think maybe some businesses were thought of because that's just not who you think of. We're just not part of your world. We're not part of your peripheral. Just full disclosure, I've met um members of the Bronner family. I've had conversations. In my first year of farming, they used to have this National Hemp History Week farmer. And so I was 2018. I knew it going into it, right? I wanted a trip to San Diego. I was going to be able to be on stage. They was going to put just a little something in my pocket. So I was like, cool. And I was going to get some soap. It's fantastic. Sign me up. Head to San Diego. Met the family. And there were many things at that organization that were aspirational for me. I absolutely want to be able to feed my team and have food trucks and different options. And oh, y'all could bring your container to work and get some soap. Really? That's nice. The CEO only makes so much compared to his employees, but you are in a position that you can do that.
Yes.
Some of us are catching up. And you disconnect, you know, as opposed to being a company that could stay in the space and set the bar higher, but don't just set it higher for people who are already on the top rung to be able to reach. If it's gonna be based on merit, then cool. Merit has never scared me. I know every room I get in for the most part, even if they attempt to tokenize me. When I get in there, you can't tokenize me because I got too much to offer for that.
Yeah, actually, and you're sort of like touching on a few things that they do. Maybe it is makes a little bit of sense to zoom out and like have some context. Like I do think that it really is a household name. There's lots of folks who use the products at home. They've been around for a long time.
I use I use the products.
Right. They're in my
Uh,
bathroom. Yes,
yeah,
exactly. And so I do think it's helpful to be like, okay, why are they such a heavyweight in the B Corp community? Like they just have been doing, they have been like quote unquote like smashing B Corp goals for for over a decade now. Like their score started at 148 in 2015, and then they got 177 points in 2018. And then their last verified score was 206, which is like a number that's a little bit interesting because there is like that really funny question that goes around the B Corp community that's like, what's the maximum amount of points you can get on the B Corp certification? And it's like, the answer is actually it varies on the industry and the size of your company and such. But if someone really wanted a number, they would say something in the range of 200 points. And so it's nothing small. It's like no small feat in any way, shape, or form. They are just scoring really high across almost every single impact area.
yeah.
But
Which is
there's
a good
like,
use of generational
exactly, there's so much,
progress. It's a
right?
good, yeah, great.
There's,
You have continued with the values that the business was created on. You found your niche. It's profitable. You've got a good product. They are such a voice in the space because many people associate B Corp certification with that brand.
Mm-hmm.
And so to just pull out like that,
There's such an interesting tension here because it's like equity, we want these standards to be equitable and we want them also at the same time to be rigorous. We want them to be
yes,
moving the needle. We want
yes.
them to be what we at Lift Economy say, moving the needle toward an economy that's for the benefit of all life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think where we're really lacking in these certifications and these standards are like there's the opportunity to like in a sense lower the bar or like make it more accessible for folks to obtain those standards, but there's also an alternative path that is like helping folks, making sure that folks have the right resources and tools to meet
Yeah.
that bar. And it's like it feels like we're trying really hard to strike that balance in the B Corp world. I think Level is really making significant progress in making
Yeah.
sure that it's like this process is more accessible to more folks.
The framework itself it definitely was focused on a certain type of company. And I think it was a learning opportunity for, the similar in agriculture. It's the small farms that make up the industry.
Hmm.
We're out here, you know, really supporting our local economy. We're out here providing food, fiber, so much for our communities. And when decisions are often made, sometimes in DC, it's focusing on those big commercial farms. And it's not focusing on who's actually making up the industry. And I feel that's challenging for those who have always been focused on to feel like maybe they're not necessarily the center of that. And that can make you feel also like nobody's listening to me. Is it nobody's listening to you, or are they just not doing what you said? There's a difference.
Yeah.
Maybe they did hear you. Maybe they listened and they thought about it. And they also thought about several other things and they decided not to do what you said. And so, if that happens, how do you respond to that? Do you accept it with grace or do you have a full on Hollywood moment? Just asking questions, rhetorical, just, bringing the conversation back around. That's all. That's all. Focusing on Green Heffa Farms, for us, we will continue forward with our certification. It's something we find value in the certification and the process and all the things that come with being a part of the B Corp community. So it's somewhere we'll continue to be. And it's a certification. I will continue to encourage other agricultural based CPG brands to look into as well, and if not to pursue the certification, definitely to learn from parts of the certification that resonate with their business model.
If you're not following Farmer Cee and Green Heffa Farms on Instagram, it's a mistake. There are an incredible content. You will laugh out loud. You will cry. It's yes, LinkedIn,
Well, LinkedIn
Instagram.
is, yeah, different kind of content. I kind of keep things spicy over on LinkedIn. I have a great time over there. But thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining Farmer Cee. It's been a pleasure, and we hope to have you back on the show in the future. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Bee. We are trying to grow our audience and wanted to ask you a huge favor that you can do right now. Try to think of one person that might like this show. Then pull out your phone and text them something like, "Hey, I think you might like this new podcast, Beyond the Bee. Check it out at lifteconomy.com/beyond. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts." Seriously, try to text someone right now. Pull out your phone. Then follow up with them to see how they liked it. This would be super helpful for us. We deeply appreciate your support.